So, unless you were in a dark cave, not taking any notice of what's going on in this country in the last few days, you will all know that on Friday there was a new legal public holiday for the peoples of Aotearoa, New Zealand, Matariki. Well, legal public holidays are a pretty mixed bag in this country. Few people have got any idea why the provincial district of Auckland, comprising about half the North Island north of Moko, in the west and Wairoa in the east, needs to be celebrated on the last weekend of January. I'm sure I can't get anyone to give an answer to why that might be. Queen's birthday holiday, well, we celebrate that in June, but it's not the Queen's birthday. We have Labour Day, which is observed in October to mark the struggle of trade unionists for an 8-hour working day. Well, a couple of years ago in 2020, only 16% of employees in the labour force were members of a trade union. So I'm not sure why we have that as a public holiday when trade unionists are such a small part of our world. Perhaps you might ask other questions about that. Members of this congregation ought to be well aware of the meaning of Christmas and Easter. Though in the 2018 census almost half of New Zealanders stated they had no religion, signifying for the first time that the number of religiously unaffiliated people has exceeded those who identified as Christians. So just because Matariki is a public holiday doesn't necessarily mean that it's a great event in everyone's life in the country. But I've been greatly pleased by the responses that I've seen from all around and put to over these last few days. So here's our chance to reflect on it today. What are we to make of Matariki, and why might it be important to have a sermon on this topic on the Sunday closest to the new public holiday? Part of the answer must be that stories and symbols that connect people to their origins and to their sense of identity are important. In this church we have a piece of the foundation stone from the Abbey of St. Augustine in Canterbury, England. Over there, behind that pillar, is this piece of the foundation stone from Canterbury. The history of the Christianity in Wales, Ireland and Scotland is a bit different, but for the Church of England as such, Canterbury is of huge significant symbolic importance. And the Archbishop of Canterbury is an office of significance for the whole Anglican communion. Although, in fact, the Archbishop has an official residence in South London, Lambeth Palace, rather than in Canterbury. But anyway, here we are. This is among the other treasures that Miranda Brown has designed for this church. Here is the version that has the design of the Abbey of St. Augustine on the wall. We haven't seen it before. Come back from the community and walk past the stone. And there's a little bit of stone that's been around for a few hundred years. It's come from Canterbury and is here with us in this church. So origins stories, of course, are of immense importance for the tana whenua of this land. There are many stories of the voyages of discovery navigated by ocean currents, the winds, the bird migration tracks, and the stars from the various islands within what we now call Polynesia. Especially the stars were important. There are several scores of waka narratives, not just the ahistorical notion of just 7 canoes arriving in the Great Fleet in 1350. There are many accounts as to how the peoples from various parts of the Pacific voyaged and settled in Aotearoa, Tuaipanamu and also Kikohu over a couple of hundred years. Before, as I understand it, the weather pattern changes meant that return voyaging was no longer possible, and much of the star navigation history was almost lost until recent revivals. Those star navigators and their ancestors had discovered every island, spread far over an enormous ocean we call the Pacific, which covers about half the planet. And those star navigators and their ancestors were doing that over these huge thousands of kilometres of water at about a time when my European ancestors were in fear of falling off the edge of the world if they ventured more than a mile or two out to sea. A great book to read on the Polynesian navigators is by a friend of mine, Andrew Crow, called Pathway of the Birds, the Voyaging Achievements of Māori and their Polynesian Ancestors. A very good read, published a couple of years ago. When the forebears of those who came to be known as Māori, after they arrived here, brought reminders of the homeland they left behind, the Tainui canoe brought sacred soil from Rangiatia, was brought ashore by Rotorua and used to construct an altar at Kawhia on the west coast. When Ngāti Raukawa and Ngāti Toa migrated from Kawhia to Otaki in the 1820s, 1930s, they buried soil from that site as a mauri under the altar of the new Haimihinari Church, Anglican Church, which is also called Rangiatia. Rather amazingly, the mauri soil was found and protected after Rangiatia was destroyed by fire in 1995 and then rebuilt. Quite how they identified precisely which was the soil that had come all the way from Rangiatia to Kawhia to Otaki, I don't know, but they did. They did. I believe they did. And the church is rebuilt, and there we have it. So, sacred soil from Rangiatia, a stone from the Abbey of St. Augustine. These are symbols of origins. And this Matariki public holiday is a midwinter feast, which has Mātauranga Māori at its centre. But I think, and I hope, will resonate with all of us. Those who have looked up what the official government websites have said about this new public holiday stress three things that is important at this time of the year. Remembrance, honouring those who we've lost since the last rise of Matariki, celebrating the present, gathering together to give thanks for what we have now, and looking to the future. So it's past, present and future, all in one occasion of getting together. It's the Māori name for Pleiades. I think in Japanese it's Subaru or Subaru, however we pronounce that. It refers to a cluster of stars that rise in winter. A friend of mine from Te Aroha was with her people, and they were having all the karakia and kororo, and by the time they walked outside it was thorough daylight, so they didn't miss seeing the stars. So have any of you got up in the morning to see if you can actually see where Matariki is? Well, there's one or two. Yes, very good. Very good. Well, I didn't. So next year I'm going to make sure I'm up at Takaparawha Bastion Point, see if I can actually see these stars. For other iwi in different parts of the country also acknowledge Puama, which is another star apparently up there as well. And the Matariki star, though, is the one that's best known, the set of stars. It's a central symbol for the Kingitanga movement, and has been so since 1858. So here's a scarf. This is the coronation scarf, the coronation of the present king. It was a bit of a cold day, the first coronation, so the women got a lot of scarves and sold a lot of them. So there we are, there's the stars. The seven of them we can see, so there's 7 Māori names, I believe. It's trying to tell us there's 9, but there's no Māori names in that too, we can't see. So there we are, there's the Matariki on the Kingitanga symbolism. So it's a symbolism that's been around for a very long time, and with significant associations for Māori and for Pacific peoples. Well, in this church it's been accustomed for a number of years to do a reading of the list of the departed around All Saints or All Souls Day in early November, and that seems an important custom to maintain. Perhaps though, in this 3 Tikana church of ours, which was celebrated in this church last Sunday with Te Pauheri Sunday, and a thoughtful sermon from Wolf Holt, perhaps in future years, maybe the Sunday closest to Matariki would be another appropriate choice for continuing the custom. Because it's a midwinter feast like Christmas, New Year feasts are for Northern Hemisphere folk. This can be our midwinter and a time for remembrance, celebration, and looking for the future. future. Indeed, if Wolf's statement last Sunday was followed up, I believe that quite a number of people came from the City Mission on Thursday, is that right? To hold a gathering naming and remembering a considerable number of people known to the City Mission who had died in the recent past, and for various reasons. Most obviously COVID restrictions, but other reasons, had not been farewelled in any way at all in a funeral or memorial service. So St Matthew's on Thursday with the City Mission was doing exactly what this Matariki season calls upon us. And so my invitation to all of you in the congregation today, including those on our dear friend St. Zoom over there, is to call to mind those whom you know who have died over the last little while, to celebrate the midwinter present, and to look forward to the promises you hope for in the coming year as spring unfurls and summer follows. So I just want to do reflections on 5 tangihanga, funerals or memorial services in the last few months, and offer some reflections on the people farewelled on those occasions. So Twana Nui Akiwa Jackson, known as Wana Jackson, was farewelled in an amazing tangihanga in Haratonga, Hawke's Bay. His ohaki was that Kaikororo Wahine, women should farewell him by speaking to him not inside the whare, we weren't inside the whare anyway because of COVID, not under the maho porch, but on the marae atia itself. The marae atia is the real marae, is the space outside the house. And a number of women from almost every single incoming Orpe group that went to that tangi took the opportunity to have Kaikororo Wahine speaking in that way. And one is close ally and friend over many, many years of struggle for Māori rights, and Anne Sykes, one of my former students, she sat on the host hapu pipeline. She sat in front of the pipeline, not behind. So very sort of symbolic things to carry out that final wish from Wana Jackson himself. So I think that tangihanga was a celebration of a life dedicated to Treaty of Waitangi, dedicated to the maintenance and enhancement of Mātauranga Māori, of Te Reo Māori and Tikanga Māori. And his work on decolonisation needs to be taken seriously, and I notice in our program today, it's been taken seriously in this church too. On Saturday, the 23rd of July, there will be a workshop on addressing the problems with the environment, a post-colonial view. So that's something that St Matthew's is contributing to the sort of work that I believe that Wana Jackson would have asked of all of us, Māori and Pākehā and all others who come to this land. So that's the looking forward part, and some of you are on the journey. Then I was at the funeral of Bruce Davidson, long-time Chancellor of the Diocese of Auckland. He was farewelled with a full requiem mass in the cathedral at St Mary's. There were 5 bishops there, many clergy and laity were there. I worked a lot with Bruce in the 1990s at General Synod, and in this diocese as we designed and put in place the structures of the 3 Tikanga Church that Wolf spoke about last summer. That structure, like all structures, is necessarily a work in progress, as Wolf noted. So we can remember the past, how we got there, got to Poheri, we can celebrate the present, but we can also reflect on how those structures might change and be altered to be more effective in the future. Then I was at a funeral service for Ngāti Tonomarsh in the Catholic Church down near Balmoral Road. She was the first woman to be appointed a lecturer in the Faculty of Law at the University of Auckland in 1966. Later she became the first woman to be appointed an ombudsman. And they decided that because the word ombudsman was a Scandinavian word and the word man there didn't necessarily mean man in the same way as we mean man, so she became an ombudsman. They decided to leave it that way, and then later banking ombudsman as well. A devout Catholic, she bore 8 children, almost all of whom were born between November and February, and she missed no teaching terms in all the time of her parenting and lecturing. And so when I was at that funeral, I was reflecting on the changes within the professional faculties of universities that I've been part of and within the church too, where women now undertake roles and responsibility previously denied to them. There was not one single woman in my LLB graduation class in 1969. Now 65% of all law students are women. I think that's a reason for celebration, but looking to the future, that's the next part of it. Is there more work to be done on gender equity issues in all aspects of our society? Well, heck yes, there's more work to be done in that area. Mary Rose Wilson died during the COVID lockdown period. I knew her at St Peter's, Willow Street, when I was a student there. And in more recent years as a friend of Gavin Rennie, who's here today. Gavin spoke at that memorial service of Mary Rose and her roles at Friendship House in Manukau City, as it then was. Work of service, social service providers and chaplains, the sort of work that she did there, is work that thoroughly deserves to be celebrated, as was her life. But in looking to the future, have the political, social and economic inequalities that were so evident to those working at Friendship House in the past, have they been solved? No, not even solved, not even ameliorated, I would suggest. Much more work to be done in the future for that work carried out by Mary Rose in her lifetime. And finally, my dear friend Joseph Parata Hawke of Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. He was my friend for 47 years. We worked together on many issues as he and his iwi struggled their way from the abject depths of depression when they were evicted from Wakaru Bay in 1951. Through to the occupation of Bastion Point, Takaparawhau in 1977-78, through the years of being shunned and unable to get any work for many of the members of that whānau for quite a long time. But then finally been accorded a farewell at Ōrākei Marae, where hundreds of people came from all around the land to pay their respects to him and salute him, his wife Reen, and their whānau for the struggle that they had undertaken for the benefit of us all in this nation. So Ngāti Whātua certainly celebrate what they've achieved since the treaty settlements of 1991 and 2012. Looking to the future, is there more to be done? Well, I think there is. Just this year, a High Court judge refused to grant a declaration that Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei hold mana whenua over central Auckland. Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei don't hold mana whenua over central Auckland. I don't know who does. Anyway, so more work to be done there, even though Joe's no longer with us. Nō reira, haere nā ngā mate, haere ki te moenga roa, haere ki te raki mārie, o te atua, moi mai rā, moi mai rā, moi mai rā koutou. Farewell to all of those whom I know and have farewelled recently. Farewell to all of those whom you know and have farewelled in one way or another recently. In the reading from the prophet Isaiah this morning, it was proclaimed that the Lord God will swallow up death forever and will wipe away the tears from all faces. The text calls for banquets and celebrations. Well, that's the word the feast could be. And emphasises the end of mourning. Let's not deny the reality of death, but to put an emphasis upon life and living after we farewell our loved ones. And the same, I think, is true for Matariki. We remember the dead, but through and in our acts of memorial we also come to see and value life anew. So, remembrance, honouring those we have lost since the last days of Matariki. Celebrating the present, gathering together as we are this morning to give thanks for what we have now, and looking to the future, looking forward to the promise of a new year. Happy New Year! Nā mihi o te tauhou ki a koutou katoa.